So we're hoping to really impact and make changes with regard to that. Of course, struck by it's hard to wrap your head around, because struck by what? It's hard to develop any trends. From year to year, I've never been able to really say there is a trend emerging, because it's struck by backing equipment, moving equipment, falling loads, overturned forklifts. There's a wide gamut, but it will be an area of concern for you all when you're doing your expansions and your job growth. You've got a lot of people in small, tight spaces, and a lot of moving equipment and moving loads. So I would encourage you to certainly look at that closely. Okay. So kind of looking backwards there, those are the fatalities for the past year and where we're at currently. But some of the reasons that you might see us on inspections, obviously fatalities are catastrophic events. We do employee complaints, referrals. We can get referrals from other agencies. But we also do some targeted or some program planned inspections. And I've got 3 slides here, fairly lengthy list. And some of these could get us into your facilities, or you might see us if you're working within the petrochemical facility. So some of the areas, lead, hexchrome, we'll go ahead. Process safety management, the national office has said that we will do a certain number of inspections in the petrochemical industry, and we're going to look at PSM. And should we go into a facility because of a fatality, a catastrophic event, a complaint, or a referral, while we're there, we're going to have to embrace that NEP. So what starts off as something different may work its way or develop itself into a chemical emphasis program inspection. And so if you're a contractor, you might get caught in that net as well. One of the other areas, let's go ahead, is construction. Typically, we have had a contractor who developed a construction list for us out of the University of Tennessee. Well, last year during sequestration, we canceled some of our contracts, and as a result, this list is now being generated within OSHA by our national office. And it's now called, instead of Dodge reports, which might be familiar to some of you who do the safety at your facility, it is now merged and become something called construction targeting. And for the first time, there's actually going to be some of your construction projects that occur inside of the petrochemical industries that will make it onto this list. So that might be a new change for some of you who are involved in the actual construction or the expansion. Heat illness. This is an area for the last 3 years that we've been concentrating, and we have written an emphasis program that allows us to stop and address people who are working outside, whether it be construction, landscaping, and kind of evaluate if those workers have got place for rest, place for shade, and if they're being provided, appropriate fluids. Okay. So while we're out there, you're wondering, what are we seeing? So the top 10 violations that OSHA has issued for fiscal 2013 last year are, starting from number 10, machine guarding. So bench grinders, pretty, and it's just an example of the different kinds of machines that have to be guarded, but a pretty easily recognizable one for our compliance officers. So therefore it would be easily recognizable probably for your folks too. Okay. Electrical design systems. Can you guys see that it's kind of blocked and it's open and there's no cover? Okay, logout, tagout. So there was an attempt here, but it sure is a lot of play. I don't think it's going to prevent anybody from throwing a switch Requirements for ladders. So this is another picture from just down the street from the OSHA office. Not always a great place to be. Okay, powered industrial trucks, design, maintenance, and operation. The next picture, this is actually a picture from a fatality that we investigated, and John actually said something that struck a chord with me, and it's something that I often talk about when I'm speaking, is that 2 years ago, whenever I was talking with family members, I was talking to a lot of mamas. So what do you think that means? Instead of husbands or wives or children, I was talking to mamas. So what does that mean to you all? They were younger that year. And in every case where we issued citations, and there were several of them, the employer would come in and he would say to me, he wasn't supposed to be on the forklift. He wasn't supposed to be on the roof. He wasn't supposed to be in the JLJ lift. And in every case, it was a young man who saw a need. You know, we needed to move some of these bales around, and their call came and nobody responded to it, and the work needed to get done. Same situation on the other two. And so what I'm hearing is, okay, that nobody told him to do that, nobody told him to be there. But yet we have these young men who are very motivated, they're good workers, they want to pitch in and they want to help, and we've trained them on how to do the job we hired them for, and we probably even trained them in safety on the job that we hired them for, but did we go the extra step and tell them what not to do? And I think I heard John say that too. I think especially with the generation that's coming along now, I mean, I love a highly motivated worker. Who doesn't? I mean, somebody that really wants to get the job done. But sometimes we have to tell them it's okay to woe down, and let's assess and see, do I know how to operate the forklift? Well, if you've never told them don't operate the forklift, they might think, well, how different can it be from just driving the car, So anyway, so number 5, wiring methods, components, and equipment for general use. I don't know if you guys can see the little strain relief issues there. Respiratory protection. So not only do you have to evaluate the respiratory hazards at the work site, but then if you give them the respirators, you've got to have the full complement of the program. They got to know how to properly store it, how to properly wear it, and that doesn't mean cutting a hole for your cigarette when you're a painter. Okay, scaffolding. So, just one of my favorite pictures. I've looked at this many times and I try to figure out if there's anything right about it. And hazard communication, been around for a long time. A lot of us think we've got our heads wrapped around it. And then, of course, OSHA came a few years ago and decided they would revise it. So we are finding some citations now for the failure to do the training that was supposed to have been done in December of last year. And I think this is a picture of Alex, took from one of his probably last inspections. And if you guys can't read it, it says Ike's fluid. And I kind of steal his story. He said, they got to looking around to try to find out where was Ike and what was his fluid, and nobody really knew. So this is improper labeling. Fall protection is number 1. Kind of stands to reason. If it's the number 1 reason on the national landscape that people are dying, stands to reason that would be the number 1 item that we're citing. And yes, that is here in Louisiana, the guy walking the tightrope. But we can see him because he's got his fluorescent shirt on, right? So when he falls, we'll know where. So there's some other work protection efforts that have been embraced by this administration. Workplace violence, ergonomics. We're looking at some novel health exposures. And I can share with you one of my pet peeves right now is not so much that it's a novel health exposure, it's actually something that's been around for a while, and that's lead. And in the last probably year or year and a half, we've responded to 3 complaints about lead exposures. And in all of those complaints, the person who identified the lead was not the host facility, it was not the contractor, but it was the employees themselves. And so that's really not acceptable. We got to be doing a better job with that, making sure that we identify it, and when we identify it, sharing its existence and making sure that we're protecting the employees. So on this novel health exposure, the current administration has kind of encouraged us from an enforcement standpoint when we're out on inspections to look at exposures to chemicals where maybe there does not exist an OSHA PEL, because the OSHA permissible exposure levels they're ancient. They're based on like 1950s and 1960s workforces, and we know a lot more now than we knew then. But the process of promulgating regulations for specific standards, health standards, would probably take us 25 years. I can tell you that I guess one of the experiences that I had that stood out in my mind was talking to a gentleman who came to the OSHA office one time who had become disabled and he could no longer work. And he told me that he had gone into his bedroom with a gun and sat on the edge of his bed with his wife outside the door, pounding on the door, pleading with him not to do it. And I mean, obviously he didn't, but he said it took me a little while of sitting there and thinking, because I thought my family would be better off without me. So we talk a lot about the fatalities, but the injuries and the illnesses that are disabling are costly as well. Okay. So some of the other worker protection efforts. This is a big ticket item right now, and temporary workers, day laborers, contingent workers, a big focus right now for the administration. So if you don't know, if you have temporary workers that are working at your facility or working for your company, and you are directing their work and you're supervising them, they are like your employees. If they get hurt, they're going on your OSHA 300 log if it's a recordable injury. You are responsible for training them. So if they're just coming for a few hours or a day or a week, you've got to train them. Even if you have entered into an agreement with the staffing agency, you're going to have a responsibility to ensure that they're trained. So if you have some kind of joint effort where the staffing agency is supposed to do part of the training and the initial training, and you're going to give them the site specific, that's okay. But just know that you're responsible to making sure that they did get the training. Okay. Then after West Texas last year, I'm sure you guys probably heard a little bit about that in April of last year. The president issued an executive order, and it challenged OSHA along with several other federal agencies to come together and look at how we could create a better way of storing and working with chemicals. And so as part of this, there's like 7 sections within this executive order. OSHA is the head for section 6, and within that section, the agency was tasked with looking at, does there need to be some improvements or some changes to existing regulations and standards? And so as a result of this executive order, the agency has issued it's called an RFI, or a request for information, to determine if there needs to be a change to the process safety management standard, as well as maybe some changes to 1910-106, which is hazardous materials, flammable materials, and then the standard on ammonium nitrate. Okay.